So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this special briefing titled The Hostage Deal and the Road Ahead. My name is Adam Odesser. I'm the director of the Dr. Stuart Lesson's Israel Action Center at the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. Over the past 24 hours, or more precisely over the last several hours, I can imagine that most of us, if not all of us, have witnessed moments that we were hoping for so long, as hostages who were taken captive during Hamas's brutal attack on October 7th, 2023, have finally been returned to their families after 738 days in captivity. I can say watching those reunions has been both heartbreaking and incredibly uplifting, really a mixture of emotions, and it's a reminder of their strength, their resilience, and the hope that define Israeli people. And after, even after everything they've gone through over the past 2 years. As an Israeli myself, this moment, feels incredibly personal. It is symbolic that today, as we head into the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah, the same holiday on which the October 7th attack happened, those who were taken hostage are now finally being let go. And as so many of you, I can imagine, I've been glued to every update, watching the faces of the families, feeling both their joy and the ache that coexist right now across Israel and across the Jewish community. It's a reminder of how intertwined our hearts are as a people, no matter where we are in the world. At the JCRC, one of our main missions is to educate and mobilize our community to advocate for Israel and to stand with its people. And moments like today remind us just how important that connection is. And our job is not done. This deal called in its first phase for the return of all remaining 48 hostages, those alive and those who are not alive. That has not happened yet, and Hamas has failed to honor the terms of the agreement up until now, which should not come as a surprise to a lot of us. 28 hostages are still being held. 28 families are still waiting for closure. The Israeli people are waiting for closure. Our community is waiting for closure. And while we also may have seen, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu speak in Israel, we need to make sure to continue to push for the release of every last hostage. So to discuss this entire day and what we should be looking for moving forward, we are grateful to be joined today by Pninia Sharvit Baruch. Pninia is a senior research fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies and one of Israel's leading voices on national security and international law. She is currently also the director of the research program Israel and the Global Powers, and is a board member of several organizations, including the International Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists and Forum Dvorah, Women in Foreign Policy and National Security. Pninia will speak for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we will turn it over to Q&A from the audience. So please submit any of your questions that you may have through our Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And lastly, I'll just mention that this call is being recorded and will be shared both on our website and on our YouTube page later today. So on that note, I want to pass it over to you, Pninia. I actually want to, before we get into the analysis, I'd like to ask you to really share, as someone who's in Israel right now, share your feelings of today and of this moment and what it means, for the Israeli people today, seeing all the images on TV, but, being there, I think I could imagine is something different. So would love to hear a little bit from how you feel and how you, yeah.
Yes. So first of all, really thank you for having me. Yes, this is such mixed feelings, as you said. I think in the last 2 years, the hostages became part of our families. I mean, we all know them. We know their names. We know the names of their family members. We know with the faces of the families. The hostages that were already released are all the time continuing to talk about the hostages who are still there. It's like one huge clan. We have the hostages square that is the square in Tel Aviv next to the Habima and the museum and in the center of Tel Aviv, not Hakameri and the museum. It's been so full. My daughter wanted to go there. Many people spent there the whole night. My daughter said, okay, she'd go in the morning, and she said it was easy to get there. The street was empty because everybody was already there. She was like in the surrounding circles, like in the streets next to it. We were all watching TV. And I think, every hostage that came and we were waiting to see them hugged by their family members, and we got attached, there's Einav Tsargauker who's like this fighting for her son, like a lioness, and Shai Miran, that was the two little girls, and there's so many incredible stories, and yet also they have the stories of those that haven't yet returned as deceased, the remains of which only 4 are due to be transferred today by the Hamas, and that leaves another 24. I especially think about the family of Tamir Nimrodi, because he's the only one that it wasn't clear if he's dead or alive, and he wasn't released, so he's probably dead, but they still don't have the official answer. And there are others that also somehow linger with the hope that maybe they are still alive. They need this finality. They need this the way to also to have a grave, and so it's not really over. But it is a huge step. And I think for me also, beyond the hostages, which is of course the most emotional thing, I think also I was really looking forward to the end of the war, also because of other reasons, namely the soldiers. And we have had casualties almost every day in the Gaza Strip. I don't have personally children there, but my friends have. Some of them have 2, 3 sons, daughters sometimes fighting in Gaza Strip, sleepless nights. So I think that's also an element. And in my view, also what's happening in Gaza, I think ending the suffering there is also, I think, important. And also, of course, the international dimension of how Israel is being demonized. And I think now we can start. I've been working on that, on the international arena, among other things, and felt quite helpless, pointless, I would say, because as long as the war was going on, it was very difficult to do anything. And now we can start breathing and thinking about how to reconstruct not only Gaza, but also Israel internally, and Israeli standing in the world. So there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Pninia, for like sharing that with us. And we know this is a very emotional time. And as you said, these hostages and their families have really become part of Israeli society, and part of us, part of the entire, Jewish community as well. Um, so thank you for sharing those thoughts. And let's turn over to the broader picture a little bit. You kind of led us into it. Help us understand, how this, where we are in this deal. We know President Trump just flew over to Egypt. What should we be looking forward to? What can we expect in the coming days and moving forward?
Yes, so I think the Trump plan, how is it called? The President Donald Trump's comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict is the official name. So it has, I would say, 2 phases, and another, I would say, third futuristic phase, let's call it that way. But so I think the first one that has been again, not completely, but mostly implemented is, first of all, ending the war itself, meaning the active combat actions of Israel. It doesn't mean that there's no continued friction. Still, there have been attempts by Hamas terrorists to attack soldiers, and then they do respond. If someone threatens the soldiers, it's not completely quiet, but it is, of course. Israel stopped its maneuver into Gaza and withdrew its forces to certain areas inside still the Gaza Strip, but nearer the border with Israel. So that's the first thing. The second, of course, is the hostages, with the return of the 20 live hostages and some of the deceased. We still have to complete that part of receiving the remains. We know that they don't have the remains of all of the 28 available, but they should have had more than 4. So there would be more that they still have to return, and others that the idea is to, since Israel does have a general idea of where they could be buried, is to point to areas that the ones entering from Egypt mainly with the tractors will go and dig in certain areas and try to find the corpses. So there's a whole arrangement of how to find or to get the remains of the other hostages that were killed. And I think the third point also that is already taking place is having more aid enter Gaza. It is important to emphasize that aid was entering Gaza all the time, except a very short, limited period in March, April, after a lot of aid was entered in the ceasefire. Then in January, February, there was a short period where there was no aid entered the Gaza Strip, but since then aid has been entering, because sometimes it's misleading as if now only Israel is allowing aid to enter. It was entering, but now there's more aid entering, and also it's not done through the GHF, this system that was implemented. So it's done more like it used to be done before, just with trucks entering. So those things are already happening. Now the next phase is the day after. And here, the plan gives a general framework that on the paper sounds very good, but it also sounds very difficult to implement. Okay, so because the idea, it includes 3 elements. The one is what is called the Board of Peace, okay, which is an international board headed by Trump, and under him, but de facto that will be headed by Tony Blair, ex-Prime Minister of the UK, with other international and Arab and regional and international actors. I know that there is already a certain list, but I don't know if it's a final list. Anyway, it's not a published list. This Board of Peace will be in charge of supervising and enabling the framework and the funding of the next stage of the control of the Gaza Strip, and that will be carried out according to the plan by 2 elements. The one that will be in charge of the everyday today, would they say, all the civilian aspects, the general aspects of running the lives, a government, all the government function and municipal functions to the Palestinian people, which would be a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee comprised of a transitional governance, comprised again of mainly Palestinians, but also also other elements that are not affiliated with any political party, namely not Fatah or PA, and definitely not the Hamas. There's a specific paragraph saying in the plan that Hamas will not take any part in this future government. And the idea of this body is that it will be a transitional body that will run things until the Palestinian Authority, PA, from the West Bank, will overgo reforms that will enable it to take control also of the Gaza Strip. Now, exactly how this body will be comprised, how it will be implemented, how will it operate, who will operate it, how exactly the funding is supposed to come again from the region, but again, who exactly will fund it, all these things are left still without the details. So that's the one issue of how will it happen, and Gaza is in ruins, most of it. So there's a lot of a very fundamental reconstruction that has to be done, but also there are also all kinds of needs of the population that already have to be met. So that's the one aspect, and the second, even the more complicated one, is who will be in charge of the public security and policing. And here, according again to the plan, there will be Temporary International Stabilization Force, ISF, sorry, and that will be comprised again with by the United States working with the Arab international partners, and it will, again, it's not clear who will be included, but it will also include Arab countries, maybe also Qatar, maybe also Turkey. It's not completely clear. It will work also with Jordan and Egypt, and it will. One of its things, it will provide support to vetted Palestinian police force in Gaza. So again, Palestinians, and again with a certain link eventually to the PA, will be instructed by this body, and this will be again the long-term internal security solution for the Gaza Strip. And then the plan says, and again Hamas will not be part of it, one of the jobs of this ISF will be also to see to the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. So there's a specific paragraph saying that there will be that all military, I'm reading, terror and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. And there will be a process of demilitarization of Gaza under the supervision of international independent monitors. This will be carried out probably by this ISF. And in the meantime, the IDF will stay in the Gaza Strip, and as this demilitarization process proceeds, the IDF will withdraw. So the withdrawal of the IDF will be based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization, again, as agreed upon between the IDF, the ICF, the guarantors, and the US. And it is also stated that the withdrawal will be out of Gaza, except for a security perimeter presence that will remain until Gaza is probably secure from any resurgent terror threat. So this means that the IDF is still there in certain areas. The ISF is supposed to enter into the area where the IDF doesn't have a presence at the moment, but we know that the Hamas is already operating this area. So this means that this body will already have clashes with the Hamas. It will have to deal with the demilitarization and taking out the weapons of the Hamas, fighting the Hamas again, and then when it does that, Israel will withdraw, and Israel will retain the security perimeter. How this will be implemented, who will be the members of the ISF, how will it operate, what will be the way it operates vis-a-vis Israel? These are all questions that are not, there are no details about that. So it raises a lot of potential friction. Now, Israel has, with the PA, a certain distribution of, I would say, of areas where the PA and Israel, with all the friction in the West Bank, have cooperated and still cooperate in maintaining or fighting security threats in the West Bank. But this is the Palestinian Authority. It's easier to deal with it. Here we will have an international element that includes Arab states, including maybe also Turkey, for example. Any friction between Israel and this body could be could be more complicated for Israel to deal with. So we are entering, for the first time, we have an international agreed element that will enter and operate in the same area where Israel might operate. Now, also, it is not clear. Or I would say in the plan, the Hamas, it's written that a guarantee will be provided by regional partners to ensure that Hamas and the factions comply with their obligations. and that new Gaza poses no threat to its neighbors or its peoples. Again, what does it mean? Which guarantees are they given? What will happen if they do something? What will the guarantors do? It's not clear. But what doesn't appear in the plan is, has Israel also given guarantees that it will not reopen or open again any front with the Hamas? What happens if the Hamas attempts to carry out an attack, or Israel feels threatened? Is Israel, what limitations are there on Israel to restart any kind of military operation? This doesn't appear here. It is not clear, but we could assume that maybe there is something like that, because that would be, I guess, a condition. That was one of the conditions of Hamas all along, that they will release all the hostages if the war ends, and Israel also gives, and they have guarantees that Israel will not start the war again once they hand over the hostages. So we could assume that there might be some kind of secret guarantees. We don't know. A third point about the future, so I would say, so these are the levels. So we said this is the board of peace, the temporary international stabilization force on the security aspect, and the temporary transitional governance on the civil aspect. What is said also that is important is that I think this plan ends the ideas and fantasies, I would say, of some Israelis of persuading Gazans to leave Gaza. So it's written very clearly that no one will be forced to leave Gaza, and whoever wishes to leave will be free to come back, and that even it's written, we will encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. And it is also clearly stated that Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. So here, these ideas that come from, I would say, the extreme right in Israel, that had this idea that this is an opportunity to re-establish settlements in Gaza or maybe annex Gaza, have a very clear negative answer. So this is about the day after. So as you can see, there's a lot of potential, but it's a very difficult to implement plan. And then we have the wider Palestinian issue. And it is dealt with, I would say, in three parts of the plan. One says that, it says that the US will establish a dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians to agree on a political horizon and for peaceful and prosperous coexistence. There's also something about an interfaith dialogue process based on the values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence, also for Palestinians and Israelis. These are very important points. Again, very difficult to implement, but hopefully maybe something will be done. And the issue of the Palestinian state is really very, very, I would say, mentioned in a very gentle way. It's written that while the redevelopment of Gaza advances, and when the PA, now look at all the conditions, when the PA reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. So we're talking about an aspiration, about statehood, about maybe a pathway towards statehood, and this is only when the conditions may finally be in place after the PA completely reforms itself. So I think this is a formula that was meant to enable Prime Minister Netanyahu to sign on to this agreement. And it is, I think, what is important is that also the Arab countries and the regional countries and the Gulf countries also agreed to this formula. So this could be a formula that would enable to get out of the deadlock of mentioning two states and a Palestinian state or not. So that's with regard to the wider. What doesn't appear anywhere is the idea of not annexing the West Bank. But that's a huge issue, and it was the condition for the Abraham Accords. And I'm sure it was put on the table as a condition by the Arab states and Gulf states, but it isn't in here. But I think, again, I presume there will be a lot of pressure on Israel, even if it's not written down, not to pursue such an action. But again, it's interesting that it's not mentioned anywhere. Again, I think politically for the PM, it would be a problem if it was mentioned in the paper itself, but there might be, again, understandings. So that was with regard to the day after. I just end here by saying, so it's very complicated, but there is here again an opportunity, which we see now in the Sharm, and there was the whole day. I don't know how many of you followed the drama of the Sharm summit. Everybody was invited, the Gulf states, the Arab states, Turkey, France, Spain, the UN General Guterres, Japan, Indonesia, and who wasn't invited? Israel wasn't invited. And then in the beginning also Abu Mazen wasn't invited from the PA. Then Abu Mazen was invited, and still Israel was the only one not invited. And there was discourse inside Israel whether this was something that Netanyahu was happy with or not, wanted to be invited, didn't want to be invited. Anyway, on the way from the airport after President Trump landed to the Knesset, Netanyahu and Trump were in the same car. And apparently, according to what he said, Trump heard that Netanyahu wasn't invited to the summit. At least that's the way it's reported here. And apparently called President Sisi of Egypt and said, invite Netanyahu. So the Egyptian invited Netanyahu, although they didn't invite him to participate. The word is the participation, but to be present in the summit. Anyway, and then it was notified that Netanyahu will travel there. There was a question whether he will travel together with Trump on the same plane. There was already rumors that El Al was requested to find the crew, and he won't fly in his own plane. There were already all discussions how he's going to get there. Now, one of the problems was that we are in the Erev Chag, yes, and we have religious people in the government, so there was a question if we will be able to go before the Chag or after the Chag, and so that was, but it was notified that he's going to come. Even the Egyptians already said that he's arriving. And then there was also a whole notification that the president of Indonesia will come to Israel tomorrow after the Chag, on an official visit, a dramatic breakthrough. It was discussed before the war that maybe there will be relations. Of course, it stopped in the last 2 years. Everybody was saying, okay, it's an opportunity. And then it was publicly declared that Netanyahu will not go because of the Chag. Of course, a lot of speculations, whether he's not going because he doesn't want to be there. Maybe they will say things that are not convenient. Abu Mazen shaking his hand. Then there were already, we heard that Erdogan and also the Iraq leader said they will not arrive if Netanyahu comes. So maybe there was pressure not to come because they were already saying they are not going to arrive if he arrives. Anyway, so it was canceled. Indonesia immediately also gave an official declaration that there's no such thing, he's not coming. So the opportunity is still there, but we see, I think this demonstrates how sensitive everything is. It's very difficult to go forward at the moment, but hopefully we will manage. And I think, in my view, and I'll end by that, this could make this war into this, I would say, a military victory, more or less. I mean, especially in the northern front, to a certain extent in the southern front, into also a victory on the political level, of gaining also something that Hamas actually tried to prevent, But again, with this government, it's going to be very difficult, which brings me to the domestic issue. This government is has very extreme elements within it. We are entering an election year, November 2026. The country is very polarized. And I think it will be very difficult for this government to take any steps that could be viewed by its voters as compromising nationalistic ideas, national ideas, depends how you look at it. So I think we have this opportunity, but I think the political atmosphere at the moment in Israel will make it very difficult for Israel to actually take advantage of this opportunity unless President Trump continues to pressurize Israel. And I'm not sure how long he will continue with this pressure. The hostages were an issue where he could also show an achievement. And I think also really, Witkoff, I think really, and maybe also Trump really cared about this issue personally. And I think I'm not sure, since now it's so complicated, I'm not sure that the US administration, but maybe you in the audience know better than me, will continue with its pressure, and you need here a lot of continuous involvement to make this very difficult kind of agreement go ahead. So I would say very optimistic that this will happen, at least not in the near future, but maybe this is the seeds for something in the longer range.
Thank you, Pnina. I mean, yeah, there's so much to talk about, and there's also some questions coming in already. And if you have a question, continue to put them in, and I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. Um, Pnina, I want to first of all thank you again, and I want to kind of focus for a second again on this first phase that we're talking about right now. I just got an alert on my phone, that Israel has received, or the Red Cross has received two of the deceased hostages. Um, my question is, what are Israel options, now following, all these declarations and speeches, both the president and the president of the United States, President Trump, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, talking about the end of the war. What are Israel's possibilities? If all of the deceased hostages are not returned? What options are
Yeah.
on the table? Could Israel continue a military offensive, or what options do they have?
I, it's a very good question. I think, well, the one thing on technical level, we are supposed to hand over bodies that are held by of Palestinians held by Israel. So that's the easy answer. I mean, they won't be handed over, but that's not, of course, the main concern of the Hamas. I think it will be very difficult for Israel to restart now a high level of intense military operations just due to to not returning the remains. I think it. First of all, I think the US will see it very negatively. I mean, they will have to persuade, first of all, the president of the US that this is something that is warranted. And it is written in again in the plan. It is written that if the Hamas has to fulfill all the conditions, including it written that they will have to all hostages alive and deceased will be returned, and if they don't do it, so it does leave Israel the option of canceling its side of the bargain. But I think it will be difficult, and also from the operational point of view, I think the forces are now withdrawn. It's difficult they have to go back and reoccupy areas where Palestinians that most of the civilians that left the area, many of them are going back. So it makes it much more difficult to fight in these areas. You will have to again start to move them out of the areas. Also, the forces themselves are already very, I would say, tired and especially, I mean, just also the regular forces. But when we talk about the reservists, many reservists are being released, which also is for them. I mean, some people have been fighting almost 2 years on reserve duty. They are losing their jobs, losing their businesses. The economy is the impact on the economy. And if any kind of military action will again involve civilian casualties, and again, I don't see how it won't because have been returning to the areas where the Hamas operatives are. So any clash will also lead potentially to civilian casualties. So again, the international campaign will start again. So I think there's a lot to lose for Israel from going back into this option. But on the other hand, I'm not sure what other leverage it has. That's part of the problem. The Hamas doesn't have. We don't have much leverage on the Hamas except by using force. So I think it's really a dilemma. I hope maybe again the solution will be, and I think that the solution, the reason that the Hamas agreed was the pressure of Qatar and Turkey. So I think again the ones that will have to put the pressure will be the US on Qatar and Turkey to put the pressure on Hamas. So if that's the levers that we have, so maybe that again could work.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna seeing a few of the questions coming in. Some of them are asking regarding the Palestinian prisoners that were released from Israeli prison. We know, can you maybe share a little bit about them? We know some of them have been deported out, to different Arab countries. Some of them have been back to Gaza. Some of them, I'd imagine some of them to the West
Yes.
Bank, but I don't know how many. I wonder if you can share a little bit about that.
Yes. So again, I don't have the exact figures now. They publish them yesterday or the day before yesterday. In all, we are talking about 1,950 Palestinians being released. I think even more were released now, 1,968. I saw a figure. Out of them, 250 are convicted prisoners. Some of them that carried out very serious terror attacks and were sentenced to life sentences and more than one life sentence. So we have some of those very serious ones. Some of them Fatah, some of them Hamas, and the others are detainees that were detained during the fighting since the October 7th. It doesn't include people that were involved in the 7th October not hostility, since the 7th October massacre itself. The Nukhbas of those are not being released. So they already, as I said, 1,978 were already released. Now, what is most of them are being released to the West Bank. Some of them are being released to Gaza. I saw that 154 were expelled to Egypt, and there are some that might be expelled to other countries. So I think that's the main destinations. I don't know exactly how many are going to the West Bank. And now, of course, every West Bank is a problem because it might destabilize the situation there, which is already very unstable. The Gaza Strip is again, they become the potential to again regroup the Hamas there. And going outside to Egypt or to other countries, they become the leadership from abroad. So all the options are bad, but those are the options. So
Yeah, so there was actually a question about what happens to those prisoners who are expelled to other countries. Do they go into prisons in those other countries? So the answer is they
no,
don't. They
no,
become free men.
no,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. Thank you. So I want to turn a little bit again to another question here in terms of what's happening right now in Gaza in terms of Hamas, showcasing that they're still in charge in a way. even though it seems like they are trying to kind of rebrand themselves, not as a military force, but more as a security force in Gaza. Um, and there's also, there's a question coming in also asking about, how much of the tunnels are still exist in Gaza. So what do we know about the situation currently in Gaza? We know there's a lot of destruction because of the war. But what else do we know that's happening right now in Gaza?
So we see that the Hamas operatives are again on the streets. Again, it doesn't mean that they are necessarily very significant figures because any young guy, and young, when I say young, some of them are like 15, 16, but they get the weapons and they are on the streets wearing the Hamas uniform. So, but they want to have this presence of the Hamas. So there are a few thousand of those already in the areas where the IDF has left. The tunnels again. The thing is that Israel destroyed a lot of the infrastructure and some of the tunnels, but it's very complicated. You can't really, didn't manage to really destroy all this tunnel network that went really under all of the Gaza Strip. The idea is that if the reconstruction is done really in a responsible way, so in rebuilding, when you have to build, when you have to dig into the ground to start the basis of the building, so and you find the tunnels, so that would be potentially a way to get rid of the tunnels, but then you have to have people that are doing the reconstruction and rebuilding these houses that are actually have an interest of really dismantling the tunnel infrastructure. And there are also a few areas where Israel didn't go into eventually. It didn't finish the work in Gaza City and in the central camps. So there are still also tunnels. Yes, again, the plan says that all this military infrastructure should be dismantled, including it mentions the tunnels. Again, how that will be implemented is a good question. If it is, so that, of course, would be a good news for Israel. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah. Thank you. So I want to, zoom us out a little bit. We know about the summit right now happening in Sharm. Um, can you talk about, what are the possibilities, the future possibilities for Israel in terms of peace? You mentioned Indonesia, Turkey. We know there's a lot that has been going on in the past. We know there's been ongoing talks with Syria, and the new regime there. What different possibilities do we see that could come to fruition in the next few months or years?
So I think again, if the situation remains stable without the war breaking up again, starting again, and so we have the potential. So Syria, there are already talks of some kind of agreement. I don't know if it will be a peace agreement because I don't think that Israel is ready to give up the Golan Heights, and it's not an issue at the moment. But I don't think they can have an official peace with Israel without resolving that. So, but a kind of agreement. Of uh, kind of an agreement of not threatening each other and of some other points that are important for Israel in Syria. I think that's something that is possible. Again, everybody's still waiting to see what will be in Syria. So there were a lot of question marks about Julani. In the meantime, in the meantime, it seems to be okay, but it's still soon to say. Lebanon could also be potentially a new beginning there if the current government succeeds in continuing to weaken the Hamas, dismantling its military capabilities. Again, it will take time, and it's not so sure that it will succeed. But if it does succeed, that will of course be a huge success of Israel, and I think a huge success of the whole region, because Hamas is of course one of the main spoilers, led by Iran. So there also could be a potential for kind again of, I wouldn't say a peace agreement, but some kind of a status quo agreement with Lebanon. Indonesia, their president really gave a very impressive speech in the UN, acknowledging Israel's right to defend itself, and so there's a potential there. Again, Israel, I don't know what happened, why in the beginning they said he will come and then he canceled it. Was it because it was leaked or because it wasn't really happening or because of, I don't know, other concerns, but there is potential there. I think when we talk about Saudi, which is of course the big question mark, I don't see them so easily giving up on a kind of official recognition by Israel of a Palestinian right of at least self-determination, if not Palestinian state. Maybe, I guess I said the formula in the plan, if that suffices, so maybe there's a potential there too, again, with a lot of US pressure. So maybe something would go there too. But I think this is all contingent about, first of all, that things have to calm down a little bit in Gaza. Um, I think domestically, as I said, we're entering into an election year, so it's going to be very difficult for an Israeli right-wing government that wants to succeed in the coming elections. They need the extreme right as voters and as potential coalition members. So to make concessions that are not accepted, and the Likud itself is a very right wing today. So it would be very difficult, especially on an election year. So I don't know if we have the leadership in Israel to make these kinds of concessions, but maybe after the elections.
Not to mention that,
Yeah.
Arab countries have also, they might not want to make any peace agreement with this current government. They're going to wait after the election since Israel is heading into the,
Yes, although here it goes the other way, because if they manage to make an agreement with this most right-wing government, any less right-wing government will probably embrace any such agreement. So it's not like what happened when Olmert was a prime minister, and there were the Annapolis talks, and then Olmert already was resigning, and then one of the reasons that Mazen gives for not going on this path was that after the elections, a more right-wing government would not respect the agreement. But this time, I think that's not such a main concern.
yeah. Thank you. So, kind of looking at this from a security standpoint, and how you see this, what do you think are Israel's real priorities right now in this moment, both in terms of security, of course, and the continuation of this agreement, and also rebuilding Gaza and the humanitarian situation there, and in terms of peace with the Arab world? Are those kind of the set priorities that Israel has right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think I would add, first of all, you have to regain the security and sense of security. So if Gaza is again run by Hamas and again people feel threatened, then it's a big problem. I don't think Hamas is a threat that even resembles what it was on the 6th of October 2023, but still it's also not only the threat itself, but also the feeling of security. So that's one thing. I think with the other region, it's more potential developments that could be positive, but there are also threats. I think Qatar and Turkey have become very prominent, and Qatar is the sponsor of Hamas, is the sponsor of a lot of campaigns that are delegitimizing Israel around the world, and we know that Qatar is behind it, so it is definitely not on Israel's side, and they are very sophisticated in the way they operate, but it's bad news for Israel that they have become so strong and so I think influential. Turkey is also a problem, especially under Erdogan. With Turkey, I'm a little bit more optimistic, maybe because the person that is very close to Erdogan and could be successor, and I forgot now his name, Kawani, or Kawan, I forgot his name. Sorry, he's actually much more pragmatic. he's the head of their intelligence at the moment and was involved in the negotiations. And he's actually not so opposed to Israel and more pragmatic. So maybe there it's also the question of the leader. Turkey and Israel had good relations in the past, so it's there. But again, at the moment, it is a rival of Israel. So again, it becoming a prominent actor here is not good to Israel. The whole issue of how the money will be, by the way, funneled into the Gaza Strip is I have a friend, she's an expert on that, and she says it's so important now already to put in mechanisms that will make sure that the money indeed goes to the reconstruction and to the people and not to a military buildup. And there are ways to do it. So I hope that this is implemented and that these things are done very responsibly. But I would add to the list of concerns also the international arena. And I think the standing of Israel in the world, including the US. I think while with this administration, the relations are very good. And I think President Trump enjoyed seeing the love that he gets in Israel. I think, I don't know how many of you saw, there was on the whole beachfront of Israel when they came with Air Force One, they flew low to see a whole thank you, President Trump, with his picture and the flag of Israel and the flags of the US, and everywhere you have the flags of Israel and the flags of the US. And really, I don't think there's anywhere in the world that he is loved more than in Israel, including the US. And that, so I think he does acknowledge that, but we know that the situation, and here I'm talking to the you know better than me. We have a big problem in the US, especially with the younger generation, especially on the Democratic side, but also I would say on the other side too. I think that's a huge concern, and the international arena more generally. I think Israel, if Israel becomes isolated, it is very dangerous for our national security. Of course, also for our economy, for our standard of living, but also for our national security. And that includes the whole world, and of course, especially the US, when we look forward to the future relations between the US and Israel under future administrations, we are very concerned. I mean, we in the INSS, we have a research program on US-Israel relations, and that's one of our focuses on trying to identify and to see what can be done to keep this close relationship between the countries. It is really very essential for our security.
Thank you, Pninia. So I think I've hit most of the questions. I'll end with one question. Bringing it back. The current moment, the hostage and the hostage families. Um, what is your sense in terms of moving forward, since all the living hostages have returned, and we still, there are still over 20, 24, 26 deceased hostages that still need to be returned. Do you think there will still be an urge and a push by, what do you think the urge will be to bring these hostages home, both I think within Israel and in the international community? Do you see it to be as strong as it was until now, or do you see it kind of dissipating away, which we would hope not? I think everyone wants to see all of them home, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think for most of the people, even President Trump, every time he says how surprised he is, how important the bringing back the remains for the families. And I think here he reflects a sentiment of many people. I mean, it's different, and I can say even also on my personal level, and I have met also parents of people whose remains are in Gaza. So, and I can understand their feelings, but I think it's much easier to have a campaign and to identify with bringing back living hostages that are suffering there, that might be killed any day, than to put the emphasis on remains. And again, it's very important for the families, but I think we can't assume that the campaign will continue, and I think maybe it has to be modified, I think, to international audiences, without just assuming that they should feel the same way for when it's living or deceased hostages. So I think that's why it really is a um, it raises a lot of questions about, again, also how legitimate will any kind of reaction of Israel be if he does decide to react just for getting back deceased remains of deceased hostages. Um, and I think also for the Israeli public, even I'm thinking about the parents again of soldiers. Okay, it's different if you're sending your son or your daughter to fight for to return to bring back and to risk their lives to bring back live hostages, but to risk their lives to bring back the remains of someone and in the meantime lose the life of the soldier. I think it is will be much more difficult also for the also internally.
Yeah, thank you, Pninia. So, we do hope that all of them will be returned, during this first phase of this deal, as I'm sure you and all of Israelis would hope for. So I don't want to take any more time from you. I know that Chag has coming in already. So I want to thank you again for your thoughtful insights and for joining us on a relatively short notice. And I want to thank everyone else on this call joining us today. This has really been an emotional day, an historic day in a way, for Israel and for the Jewish people. And we continue to hope for the return of all the hostages. And we also recognize the strength of our community and of Israelis, both in Israel and in here in the greater Washington area and around the world, and standing together during these times. We want to encourage everyone here to stay engaged and connected and to join upcoming community events to come together and celebrate the Simchat Torah, the return of the remaining living hostages, and hopefully the return of all the hostages that are still held by Hamas. I would also be remiss to not mention that our annual gala is coming up on October 29th, which is another opportunity for us to come together. So I invite all of you to join us as well on October 29th. I'll end by wishing you, Pnina, Chag Sameach, and thank you again so much. Thank you all for joining us here today. Be well, stay safe.
And
Thank you so
if
much.
I could just
Yeah,
say thank you because I looked up and saw all the incredible work, and I think thank you for all the people that I don't see there in the webinar for all that you're doing all the time for Israel, and I think it is so important that we have such friends. And I saw one question that we didn't answer, but if anybody who has questions, I will be happy to, because that's actually my expertise is the whole issue of war crimes and genocide. And no, we're not carrying out genocide, but there are issues, and we have to face the reality. It's not easy, and anyway, I really invite you to continue to ask any questions if you wish, and again, Chag Sameach to everybody over there, and thank you again.
thank you, Pnina.